Hello, welcome to the Chemistry World Book Club podcast. This month we're reading Half-Lives, The Unlikely History of Radium by historian Lucy Jane Santos. The book traces the story of a radioactive element, from its ascendance as a cure-all ingredient in the late 19th century, to the gradual downfall and eventual discredit of the entire radium industry. I'm Katrina Kramer, Chemistry World Science correspondent and your book club host. Things are slowly going back to normal after the coronavirus lockdown, but will still be a little while until we are able to go back into our offices. So in this episode, we're back on Zoom, just in case you are listening rather than watching the video and wondering why the audio is a little bit different from what it usually is. This time, I'm quite excited to be joined by two of Chemistry World's newest reviewers, Becky and Nikki. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
I'm Becky. I am a secondary school science teacher. I teach ages 11 to 16 and I teach them chemistry and physics.
Hi, I'm Nikki Mann. I'm an Australian chemist based in Berlin and I work for a tech startup that offers developmental services in green chemistry and digitalization.
So we read this lovely book today. I really actually quite like the cover. I quite enjoyed that one. Becky, you wrote the review for Chemistry World. Could you give me a little intro what the book is about?
Yes, so it starts off kind of briefly going through the history of the discovery of X-rays and then the discovery of the new radioactive elements, and then it kind of details the history of all the different purposes that they used radium for. So it started off from medicinal purposes, but then it became much more of a vanity-based product, and it details how that history developed and kind of where we are now roughly with radium.
Fantastic. So, to be fair, I expected something a little bit different before I started reading. I don't know what you kind of expected before you started reading.
From the title and the background of the author being a historian and everything, I wasn't expecting anything extremely technical, which is good, but rather like a timeline or a progression on how radium was discovered and used like scientifically and in industry, and also how it was treated within a societal context, I guess. I mean, in my general expectations was like a biographical highlights of the life of radium.
Did you get what you were expecting?
Yes.
Fantastic. I mean, because I was expecting much more of like the story of kind of the discovery of radium and the discovery of radioactivity, these kinds of things, and they are touched upon briefly, particularly at the beginning. But I was quite pleasantly surprised that, as you said, Becky, it's much more of a story of the use of radium and how it came to be part of almost like popular culture. Everyone wanted a piece of it.
Going into it, I definitely thought I knew everything. Going into it as a scientist, I thought I already know everything there is to know about radium. There's not going to be much in this that's going to surprise me, but actually there was so much in there that I didn't know, and it's definitely enlightened me as to what was out there, and it's changed my view of things.
Did you have a favorite bit or like a thing you found most shocking, surprising,
I live not too far away from Buxton, so hearing all about the radioactive spas and the spa treatments that you can have with the radioactive waters really, really close to home really scared me, but then at the same time it made it so much more real, and I knew it was real anyway, but it just brings it closer to home.
Yeah, and it's not something you know about, I guess, even if you visited those places. It doesn't seem to be a part of history people very much talk about.
No, definitely not in Buxton.
Even though it's really fascinating, and I guess from today's point of view, it seems very strange to decide, I'm going to have a bath in this radioactive water. Hey, healthy. But I guess back then it was all the fashion.
Yeah, and it's scary to think the kind of things that they were doing, and it's scary to think that even when things were starting to turn bad and the evidence was telling people that it was bad for their health, people just didn't want to believe it at first, and that's really scary.
Yeah, it was almost like it was I think they called it the radium craze. Like everything had to have the label radium in it, and even things that didn't even have any radium in it, just because you could sell it better. Nikki, what did you think, or do you have a favorite bit?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite, or the thing that stuck to me the most was when they talked about a liquid sunshine therapy. I think saying that it was based on the sunlight therapy, which they used in the late 1800s to try and cure TB. They assumed that UV from the sunlight can kill bacteria that cause the disease. And so for the radium sunshine therapy, you drink I think a preparation of quinine and water, like a gin and tonic, because it luminesces under UV light, and that was supposed to be, so the patient drinks it, and it's supposed to go into your bloodstream, and then where the tumor of the patient is, you're supposed to put radium on, expose it to radium, and that would make it fluoresce, and that would cure the disease or kill the bacteria or whatever causing the tumor. So I thought that was quite interesting because I've never heard anything like that.
Yeah, that certainly sounds very strange. What I felt, I think you mentioned that in your review, Becky. You mentioned the pictures in the middle, so I see if I can show some of them. They're like a mix of photos and pictures of old ads that appeared in papers. Let me just see if I can bring some up. There's a picture of the radioactive spa in Buxton. Items used for radium treatments, and here like an ad for, put this in your body because it's excellent. So I think these were really nice finds. And what I enjoyed is that a lot of this is part of the author's own collection. So she does have a little almost like an online museum, so you can go on the Radium Museum website and look at the individual items. There's a little bit more history for each of them.
I definitely didn't expect the pictures in the middle. It was just when I got there, I was like, wow.
Certainly sounds like a lot of effort putting all of this pretty much forgotten history together. So to find out more about the book and what it was like to write it, I called up Lucy Jane Santos on Zoom.
I'm Lucy Jane Santos, and I am an expert in 20th century history, beauty and leisure, and right at the moment my particular obsessions is radium. One of my things is I like the history of cosmetics, and I go to auction houses a lot, or did in normal times, and I buy just random boxes. They're usually from house clearances, and I have this thing that I love old makeup. I love lipsticks. I love to think about the people who used these. And one day, probably about 8 years ago, I bought one of my boxes, and in it was a little pot of powder. It was in French. And my French isn't brilliant, but I know the word radium when I see it. And it really, really intrigued me because this was face powder with radium in it. And I, of course, started thinking, what is this? And I went onto the internet and did a search, and I was looking, and I started buying books about radium, and I couldn't find anything. Occasionally they would mention something like, and there was radium lipstick, there was radium face powders or toothpastes or condoms, but no other information. So really, because I couldn't find it, I decided to start researching it myself, and then that eventually led to me writing this book. I think the thing that I was very keen on getting out in this book is the length and the breadth of this. It wasn't just a couple of companies who were either fraudulent or criminal. It was a lot of companies offering a lot of different products for over 40, 50 years. This happens. And one of the things I wanted to do was this idea of that you could walk down a high street in Britain, and it's important to say that this book is primarily about Britain's experience of radium. You could walk down a high street and you could go to Boots the chemist, and at any time between sort of 1910 and 1940, you could probably go into Boots the chemist and get at least 4 or 5 items that are or claim to be radium based. You could go into Curry's, I'm just thinking of shops that we still have today, Selfridges, Harrods, these big name places, and buy these products. So the thing I wanted to do with this book was really talk about the amount and how normal it was, and getting away from that buckle up Twitter or shock or horror. This was so normal. This was so everyday. And that is one of the really fascinating things about it, because how have the journey from something being so everyday, so normal, to where we are now is the story of radium.
What was the most surprising and most interesting thing you learned by writing this book?
Actually, I think my favourite bit was learning about places that I thought I knew about. So I have a whole chapter about spa towns. And there are spa towns in places that I had at the time not been to. So like a place in Czech Republic called Jakimov, which I hadn't been to. And then I went to, and I started understanding they were advertising themselves as a radon spa. They still do today. So you can go there and get a radon bath. Pretty much the same as you could in 1909 when they first started. But the biggest surprise was that it wasn't just in countries like that, it was also here. So one of the most moments I had was looking through a copy of the Daily Mail from 1904 and seeing this massive advert about Bath, the city of Bath here, and it called itself Britain's Radium Spa. And that was fascinating to me because, you can pretty much spend a lot of time in Bath and nobody mentions that one of their biggest marketing tools to get people into their waters for about 20 years was the fact that the waters were radioactive.
So you obviously did one of those radium or radon spa treatments, or one of those baths. What was that like?
I've done a couple actually. So I went to, the first radon spa in the world is in a place called Jakimov in the Czech Republic. It's a couple of hours outside of Prague. And I went to a place called the Radium Palace, which I write about in the book. And it was built in 1911. It's a massive, beautiful hotel. And it's absolutely fascinating. You go down into the basements of this really lovely hotel. There's hazard warning signs, radiation warning signs everywhere. Everyone's obviously very clinical. There's lots of noteboards and people writing things down. And you go into this changing room and you obviously take off all your clothes, and then the lady runs a bath for you and you get in the bath. And then you're in this very weird situation. There's a massive room that's got lots of curtains. So there's who knows how many people, maybe about 20 people in the room, I don't know, all in their individual baths. And you lay there and the water's a nice temperature and you can feel these bubbles all going on your skin. And then you also feel very heavy because obviously it's metallic, isn't it? It's drawing things from you. And then you lay there for 20 minutes and then a little alarm goes off and the lady comes in and helps you get out of the bath. And then you go and lay down for 10 minutes because you are exhausted.
Do you think there's like a modern equivalent of what was happening then? I guess it was very normal back then. Everybody, knew about it, used it, was, almost disregarded. It was so normal.
I think a lot of things that we use now could potentially be the modern day equivalent. It is the same thing. You can read in a newspaper about a wonderful new thing, new scientific discovery, and then go into a shop and see something that has the same name. And you think, well, it must work because I read about it working in this different context, so it must absolutely work here. People have asked about whether I can think of a particular product that will end up being as shocking that we used to use. And I don't know. Sometimes I think about something like Botox, because obviously that's a poison, that's something that we use that hasn't necessarily been, the long-term implications of it aren't necessarily known. But I'm not sure. And I don't think anything will capture the excitement that radium had, and also the way that it infiltrated every aspect of society. Like I said, literature, cinema, all of those things, theatres. Even if it was Botox, we wouldn't necessarily expect to go to the theatre and see a Botox dance like you would for the Radium dance in 1904. Just like in the 40s, you start getting people talking about penicillin lipsticks, for instance. It's the same thing as the radium. It's people using science as a hope, getting excited about it as well.
That was Lucy Jane Santos talking about half-lives. When I was reading this book, I thought, there was such a craze around radium and, products were sold that didn't have any radium in it, but because the name was big, and there were other things that were, just related to radium, just chuck the name in and it makes it popular. Is there like a modern equivalent, you think, that, is there something similar people would buy now just because it has something in it and there's not really any, proof that it does anything?
Oh, actually, yesterday I went for an ice cream and there was a flavor where it was like black lemon. So I think a lot of different food stuff like ice cream, burgers and whatnot, they have the activated charcoal in it. But I mean, I've used it in the lab to clean organic solvents and samples, but I don't know how it works in food, but it's such a big popular thing at the moment. So perhaps that or...
Yeah, it's in quite a lot of kind of beauty-based kind of products as well. So like your face masks and your various creams. It's something that is very much kind of out there, a bit like radium was, because radium was in the kind of beauty products back in the day, and that is kind of odd considering if you get radiation poisoning you would lose your hair, but it's in hair care products. But yeah, definitely I think the activated charcoal kind of stuff is the modern day equivalent at the moment.
I guess, hopefully, it's not as toxic as radium was or anything radioactive. So was there anything in the book you felt was missing or, you didn't like?
I think for me, it was a really good historical kind of piece, and it explained the science very early on, so you didn't even need to be a scientist to understand it. I think for me, at the end, it just kind of jumped that little bit too quickly to now we are in a position where we're kind of scared of radioactivity. I think more on that kind of transition around it being the craze to it being accepted as something that isn't good for you. I think I would have liked to have seen a little bit more there, but maybe there could be a sequel.
Okay, yeah. Nikki, what did you think?
I didn't know anything about radium in general before reading this book, so I wasn't really expecting particular stories or get transitions from the craze and what's happening nowadays. So I didn't think anything was missing because, I guess I wouldn't know if there was any.
That's fair enough. So it felt like a complete story to you.
Yeah, I guess the story doesn't end at the end because she was saying that there's still the spars that are around.
Yes, indeed.
And sit in radium water.
That's true, yeah. There's still one, at least in Europe, there's one spar town that offers radioactive treatments. It's interesting that it still exists, that it survived all of this.
A lot braver than me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that when they retested some of the products that are supposed to have radium in it, they end up having significantly lower levels than was advertised. It's probably a good thing, I guess. But maybe this is why it took such a long time for the actual detrimental effects of radioactivity to kind of come out, because there were like individual cases and then they kind of accumulated and it kind of slowly became clear that there's something about it and you probably should put it on all your beauty products. So would you recommend this book, and if so, to who?
I've actually already recommended it. I've spoke to some of my colleagues about it already. I was almost like a kid in a candy store. I was like, oh my God, have you heard this? Did you know this? And I just got very overexcited by it. So I have actually already recommended it to people, and I'm definitely going to be taking it away and putting some of the history into my lessons and sharing it with my colleagues. Because I think it really brought it home for me. So if it can do that for me, I imagine for the kids that I teach, it'll make it all that little bit more real, and it won't be very much why are we learning this? So it's that kind of context-based thing, which I think is really going to change my practice.
Absolutely. And it feels like it's not just a kind of forgotten part of history, which might just be because of the fact back then it was just so normal, nobody really talked about it or wrote it down. But also I feel it really nicely shows that science progresses, that there's not one truth, that things can change about the things we think we know, and that's what science is all about, I guess.
Yeah, I think attitudes definitely have changed, because just a few years ago, they discovered 4 new elements, and it was nowhere near as big of a thing as back then when they discovered these radioactive elements. It was massive, and then there was the radium craze, and it was this big deal, whereas we've discovered 4 relatively recently, and it's just kind of flown under the radar a little bit. And in my opinion, I was amazed that we discovered new elements, and it's happened in my lifetime, but it doesn't seem to have filtered through to everyone.
Yeah, maybe it kind of also shows like it's kind of an underlying current, like people's general attitude towards science, whether something is, you know, exciting or not, and whether you take it up in, you know, more general culture. So yeah, that's a very interesting point. And Nikki, what did you think? Would you recommend this book?
Actually, yeah. I mean, I think it was for a very general audience, and like you don't have to be interested in science. It was not very technical at all, which I really liked for a popular science book. And coming from like that, like this is a scientific thing, but it's also a very cultural thing. So I think for everyone, it's not written in a way that it was too difficult to read. I think it's for everyone.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the way that the science was explained was spot on, really. I think as scientists, because we know so much, we like to throw everything at it. And sometimes that means that we maybe can't get across what we're trying to explain in a way that everybody can understand. Whereas in this, it's simplified, but it still gets the science across, which I think is really good. And I think that she's done really, really well to do that.
Fantastic. So if you'd like to read a book that is about chemistry, but also about how society and businesses interpret scientific discoveries and trends, Half-Lives is published by Icon Books and is available now. Next month, we'll be reading something a little different. United, We Are Unstoppable. 60 inspiring young people saving our world. Edited by self-described climate and energy nerd at Bloomberg News, Akshat Rathi. It's a book of essays told by the people who are fighting for their homes and their futures in the face of climate change. Until then, bye!